is Adah Crandall. I am 16 years old and I'm an organizer with Portland Youth Climate Strike and Sunrise Movement PDX. For almost a year now, I have been leading a campaign in Portland called Youth vs. ODOT. It is a series of bi-weekly climate rallies all around the city, demanding that the Oregon Department of Transportation, ODOT, stop widening freeways and instead prioritize a rapid and just decarbonization of our region's transportation systems. I got involved in this originally because in 7th and 8th grade, I attended Harriet Tubman Middle School, which is right next to one of the busiest parts of the Interstate 5 freeway. Thousands of diesel trucks pass the school each day, filling our air with toxic pollution that has been linked to serious health issues such as asthma and lung cancer. On bad days, we could see smog in the air during recess, and some students were afraid to even go outside. The situation was already terrifying, but we soon learned that the Oregon Department of Transportation had plans to make things even worse, adding several more lanes to the freeway. Even as 7th graders, we could understand that more lanes meant more vehicles, and more vehicles meant more emissions and more pollution in the backyard of our school. We were fortunate to have a social studies teacher who helped us start advocating against the project, giving testimony at task force meetings and educating our peers. Taking action was empowering, and that group of middle school students soon became some of the most vocal critics of the project. But the more I learned, the more apparent it became that the situation at Tubman is unfortunately not all that unique. It is just one single part of a much larger pattern. Our current transportation system prioritizes profit and economic growth over the safety of our communities and planet. We often think of the climate crisis as something happening in the future, but the reality is that it's happening now. Last summer in Oregon, we experienced record-breaking wildfires and heat waves. I'd look outside my window and the sky was red, and in Portland, temperatures reached 116 degrees. Freeways play a larger role in this than people may think. In the US, 29% of our carbon emissions come from transportation. In Oregon, that number is closer to 40%. So what started as a matter of safety at recess for my classmates and I quickly became a much bigger effort to regulate emissions and stop the climate crisis, specifically through the lens of transportation. Right now, the status quo tells us that we have to keep widening freeways because that's just the way that we've always done things. But what young climate leaders know is that in order to stop the climate crisis, we need to be willing to envision and enact radical and bold solutions. We are not going to solve this climate crisis by doing the same things that we always have. So, for the last 11 months, young people with the Portland chapter of Sunrise Movement have been leading bi-weekly rallies calling attention to the connection between transportation and climate. The rallies are a much-needed call for change, not just in policy, but in the way the public and our leaders talk about these issues. The campaign name, Youth vs. ODOT, sounds extreme, but the situation really does feel like us versus them. ODOT has a choice to make. They can either continue to side with the extractive status quo that is destroying our futures, or they can join the youth in fighting for climate justice. At the first Youth vs. ODOT rally in April of 2021, there were only a handful of people there. Now, almost a year later, we've had upwards of 70 people attending the rallies, including multiple state legislators and journalists from major outlets. We have made local and national headlines and gained the support of important decision makers. In August 2021, a member of our regional government stated that he would no longer vote for any freeway expansion projects, a bold stance that has sparked conversation among other leaders as well. In September 2021, Sunrise organizers were invited to meet with Oregon Governor Brown about our campaign demands, and later with the newly appointed member of the Oregon Transportation Commission. Later that month, Portland's youth climate strike of thousands of students marched past the ODOT headquarters, tying the Youth vs. ODOT campaign to a global movement for climate justice. And just a few weeks ago, the Oregon Transportation Commission expressed on record their skepticism for several of the proposed freeway expansions around the state, finally echoing points young advocates had worked months to persuade them of. It's hard to comprehend these victories because at a glance, it doesn't really seem to make sense how we could have an impact. ODOT is a huge, powerful agency with billions of dollars to pour into advertising and PR and lobbying. But despite this, they have found a formidable opponent in a group of passionate teenagers with megaphones and cardboard protest signs. We are consistent and driven and refusing to go away. As young people, we possess an urgency that ODOT in its current state will never understand. We have used this freeway fight as an opportunity not just for policy change, but for connectivity. In the face of the climate crisis, it's easy to feel isolated and alone. But joining together every other week with people who care about the same things as I do, who are willing to collectively fight for change, that is what gives me hope. This unity is what makes us strong. It's the reason that slowly but surely, despite all odds, we are winning. The Youth vs. ODOT campaign started in Portland, but it doesn't need to end there. I think that really one of the best things about this campaign is that it's a tactic that can be replicated almost anywhere across the country, across the world. The freeway expansions in Portland are terrible, but they are absolutely not the only ones out there. With the recent passing of Biden's federal infrastructure package, states are going to be receiving billions of dollars for various projects. If we are serious about meeting our carbon reduction goals, it is critical that this money is spent not on freeway expansions, but instead on transit, rail, bike and pedestrian infrastructure, and other projects that will reduce our emissions. All state departments of transportation, not just Oregon's, have a responsibility to do their part in stopping climate change. But what the Youth vs. ODOT campaign has taught me is that these agencies will not make that decision on their own. It will require sustained pressure and action from our communities to ensure that our future transportation system breaks free from the status quo and sets us on a path to climate justice. I am fighting for a world where one day students don't have to worry about if the air they're breathing at recess will one day give them asthma or lung cancer. A world where young people don't have to rally every other week because we're scared for our futures. A world where everyone has a transportation system that meets their needs and doesn't hurt our planet. But I am just one person. Youth vs. ODOT is just one small team. We are powerful, but we cannot do this on our own. Stopping the climate crisis is a collective effort that is going to take the energy and collaboration of people all over the world. We can start small, we can start in our communities. If a handful of teenagers with a megaphone and a good idea can transform the way our state talks about transportation, imagine what a whole world of people could do.